Imagine stepping outside tomorrow morning and realizing every shoe on earth has vanished. No sneakers, no boots, no sandals by the door, no little foam prison for your toes. You look down at the pavement, the gravel, the glassy threats hidden in the grass, and suddenly walking feels like an expedition into enemy territory. Now, here is the strange part. For most of human history, that was normal. Your ancestors crossed forests, deserts, frozen ground, volcanic rock, riverbeds, thorns, ash, mud, and insect-filled soil with no arch support, no memory foam, and no logo. So the obvious question seems simple. Why did ancient humans never wear shoes? Except the clean answer is already wrong. They did wear them, sometimes. But not always, not everywhere. And probably not for the reasons your modern feet want to believe. Because when you ask why ancient humans went barefoot, you are not really asking about fashion. You are asking why the human foot was once treated as equipment. Not decoration. Not a medical problem. Equipment. A living sensor pressed against the world. The strongest evidence does not begin with a perfect ancient sneaker. It begins with something creepier. Toe bones. In 2005, paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkhaus studied ancient human foot bones and noticed a strange pattern. Some Upper Paleolithic humans had strong lower legs, but relatively weaker toe bones, especially compared with earlier humans who probably spent more time barefoot. His argument was not that he had found a shoe. He had found the ghost of one. Think about that. A shoe can rot away completely, but the body may still confess that it was there. If toes spend less time gripping, flexing, stabilizing, and fighting the ground directly, they do not need to be built the same way. The skeleton records the missing stress. This is where the story gets interesting because the evidence for ancient footwear is both obvious and almost invisible. Shoes are made from the kinds of materials archaeology hates. Hide, bark, grass, fiber, leather, sinew, useful things, fragile things, things bacteria look at and say, finally, lunch. Stone tools survive because stone is stubborn. But a woven sandal left in a wet forest for thousands of years does not become a museum artifact. It becomes dirt with ambition. So when people say ancient humans never wore shoes, part of that idea comes from a trap. We find what survives. And what survives is not always what mattered most. That sounds obvious until you look closer, because another simple explanation seems convincing. Maybe they did not wear shoes because they could not make them. Maybe footwear required too much technology. Maybe early humans were clever enough for stone points and fire, but not clever enough to wrap feet. Maybe the whole question is modern projection. That skeptical argument deserves weight. Shoes are not simple. A useful shoe has to protect without falling apart. It has to bend, grip, fit, dry, and not turn every walk into a blister-based hostage situation. And if your group is moving constantly, every object has a cost. A shoe is time. Material, repair, skill, carrying weight, replacement. For a hunter-gatherer, the question was not, would this be nice? The question was, does this earn its place? Sometimes the answer was no. A hardened barefoot could be good enough. The toes grip. The arch works like a spring. The skin reads changes in ground texture before the conscious mind has time to complain. Your modern shoe-trained foot feels vulnerable because it has been protected. But protection has a bargain hidden inside it. Use a system less, and the system changes. That does not mean barefoot life was magical. It was not. Feet got cut. Toes broke. Thorns went in. Parasites existed. Frostbite was not a motivational quote. A sharp rock does not care how natural your gait is. The barefoot human was not invincible. The barefoot human was adapted and exposed at the same time. That tension is the whole story. Now comes the hard anchor. In 1938, archaeologist Luther Cressman excavated Fort Rock Cave in Oregon and found woven sandals under ancient volcanic ash. Later dating placed Fort Rock-style sandals roughly around 10,000 years old, making them among the oldest directly dated footwear ever found. And they were not luxury objects. They were practical, woven, flexible shields for feet moving through a harsh landscape. This changes the question. Ancient humans were not people who failed to invent shoes. They were people who chose footwear when the environment made footwear worth the cost. Desert floors, freezing ground, sharp stone, long travel over punishing surfaces. In those places, shoes made sense. But if the ground was soft, warm, wet, muddy, or constantly changing, bare feet could be better. A shoe that protects you from a thorn can also make you slip on rock. A sole that blocks heat can also block information. So footwear was not a single invention that conquered the world immediately. It was a local solution, a seasonal solution, a problem-specific technology. And then there is the body itself. In 2010, Daniel Lieberman and colleagues published a study in Nature comparing habitually barefoot runners with runners who grew up wearing shoes. They found that many barefoot runners tended to land on the forefoot or midfoot, reducing the hard collision forces often seen when cushioned shoe runners strike heavily on the heel. This finding did not prove that barefoot is always better. That is the cartoon version. It showed something subtler and more uncomfortable. The foot and the ground are in conversation. Change the surface under the foot, and the body changes how it moves. Give the heel a big soft pad, and the nervous system may allow impacts it would never tolerate barefoot. Remove the pad, and the foot often behaves differently, because pain and sensation are not just annoyances. They are information. Bring that back to you. Bare feet turn the ground into a message. Shoes turn the message down. Sometimes that is life-saving. Sometimes it is numbing. Ancient humans lived inside that trade-off every day. They needed protection, but they also needed feedback. They needed speed, traction, warmth, and flexibility. They needed to survive tomorrow, not win an argument on the internet about minimalist footwear. And this is where the skeptic comes back stronger. Maybe we are romanticizing barefoot life. Maybe ancient people wore shoes far more often than we think, and the evidence simply disappeared. Maybe the famous barefoot image of early humans is just archaeology's preservation bias dressed up as common sense. If grass sandals, hide wraps, and bark soles decayed almost everywhere, then the absence of shoes in the record cannot prove bare feet in real life. That is true, and it matters. The honest answer cannot be that ancient humans never wore shoes. The honest answer is that footwear probably appeared much earlier than our best preserved examples, was used unevenly, and left behind a record full of gaps. But the other extreme is also wrong. They were not modern people accidentally missing sneakers. Their feet were not helpless objects waiting for industry to rescue them. For millions of years, before thick soles and factory sizes, the human foot evolved as a contact organ. It balanced the body over uneven ground, stored energy, helped people climb, crouch, stalk, run, carry, flee, and stand around fires that did not care about comfort. A foot was not just a platform. It was a survival interface. And once you see it that way, the question gets bigger. Civilization did not just give humans shoes. It changed what humans expected their bodies to tolerate. Hard floors, straight roads, concrete, broken glass, urban filth. Social rules that decide a bare foot is rude, dirty, childish, poor, or strange. The modern world did not merely protect the foot. It made the unprotected foot socially suspicious. The same body part that carried your ancestors through wilderness now looks inappropriate in a grocery store. Not because the foot changed, because the world around it did. So why did ancient humans never wear shoes? They did, but not as a permanent cage. They wore them when the ground demanded it, when cold threatened tissue, when plants punished skin, when stone could slice a journey short. And when they did not wear them, it was not because they were too primitive to understand danger. It was because the bare foot was already an old technology, soft enough to feel, strong enough to work, fragile enough to remind the body that the world was real. Next time you slide your foot into a shoe without thinking, pause for half a second. Under that rubber, leather, foam, or fabric is a body part designed for a much older conversation. A conversation with mud, heat, stone, grass, ash, ice, and pain. Your shoes did not invent walking. They muted it.